I love a divisive movie, and Emerald Fennell somehow always delivers that. She has an Oscar down. She had the viral hit of Saltburn a couple of years ago, and now she's doing an adaptation of Wuthering Heights starring Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. What could possibly go wrong? I was on the higher end of people that liked Saltburn, and I was pretty interested in this adaptation, even though I didn't know much about the original novel going in. But I'm a huge fan of Jacob Elordi, a pretty big fan of Margot Robbie, and I think their pairing in Wuthering Heights seems pretty interesting from what I know about the story, but the film doesn't really capitalize on any of that, which is kind of my biggest problem with the movie. It's just riddled with mediocre performances all around. Every single gothic element feels like it's just completely taken away, and there's no stake of tragedy or loss. It's just a cheating, scandalous, steamy romance between Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. And for some people, that's going to be enough, but that just has zero depth in the film, primarily because the performances also aren't really that good. Margot Robbie's character has the most inherent depth to her, at least in this version of Wuthering Heights that Emerald Fennell is telling, yet her performance is just really average. Jacob Elordi has a lot less character to work with, in my opinion, in this adaptation, and his performance is nearly terrible in this movie. His accent is so bad, and I'm not just saying that to hate, because I think he was absolutely phenomenal, giving one of the best performances of last year in Frankenstein. I'm very pro Jacob Elordi. This just did not work for me at all whatsoever. I think the second half of the film works a little bit more because the dynamic between their characters is a little more fleshed out. So they're just getting their freak on it, and sometimes that's entertaining. But for the most part, this movie doesn't do anything to keep me engaged the whole way through, and that just boils down to the very mediocre performances. I actually did find the evolution of the overall story to be interesting, but I think it's just the sheer freakiness of the movie that makes it like you can't stop watching it because you just want to know how much crazier it's going to get. But tying that back into the performances, there's not much of a through line between the childhood, teenage, and adulthood romance, in my opinion, especially the teenage. It feels like in the middle part of this movie, they're playing very immature characters, but they look the exact same as they do in adulthood and later in life. It doesn't feel like it's actually Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi playing these teenage characters. It feels like this weird out-of-body thing where they're trying to play them, but they don't look like they are. Margot Robbie's like 35 or something. They both look very young for their age, but they do not look like teenagers. Like I said at the top of this video, I'm not very familiar with the source material, but it's a very romanticized aesthetic. Again, it's not very deep and dark like the gothic elements of the romance feel like they're supposed to be. It reduces the toxic, obsessive nature between these characters to something that gets justified because they're just having a freak off and they're both cheating on each other, and it's just like kind of like a steamy romance. Like that's kind of all that they're doing. They're doing nothing deeper than that, which kind of just turned me off from the film. The script just feels so one-noted, and it feels like there's so much deeper things to dive into in the complex relationship that all of these characters have with one another, all of the characters that are being used and not being used, and those who love each other and those who don't. None of that is properly conveyed on a thematic level. It's all just this person wants to fuck this person and that person wants to fuck the other person. That's really it. I'm not sure if the reasoning was ever confirmed, but the director did say that the quotations around the title are very important. I think it's because it's some sort of a different retelling and not necessarily an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. But to me, that just feels like a really stupid excuse to make it like, what's going on in a teenager's mind while all of this is playing out? Like, it's kind of just dumb to me. It's an excuse for it to not be a thematically deep and interesting and articulate expression of romance and obsession. It's just trying to be a cheap teenage horny drama. As negative as I've been, this film on a technical level was completely unsurprising to me in the best way possible. I think Saltburn is such a good looking film. It's style over substance at times, and I think that's exactly what this film is as well. The sets are absolutely beautiful, but my favorite part of the entire movie is the music. It's a very weird but important, in my opinion, blend of modern music. I mean, Charlie XCX has a track on this film, but also blending this Victorian and Gothic tone within the score. It is super duper interesting, and again, I don't think the film is great by any means, but the technical aspects did not surprise me at all. I will say, during the third act, they started to build up this really interesting thematic dynamic that just wasn't present throughout the rest of the film, of how obsession is death and death is love, but then they just intercut a bunch of footage that hands it to you on a silver platter And I was kind of over it. It's just so on the nose. Like, Emerald Fennell doesn't think that her audience has any comprehension skills. And that, in my opinion, encapsulates the entire film. I'm not saying I'm smarter than the next person. Again, I don't know much about the source material, but there is no depth to this romance. It is strictly steamy to be steamy. And I think the ending and how on the nose it is the perfect representation of that. At the end of the day, I found myself entertained during Wuthering Heights, but nothing more than that. It felt like there was a lot more under the surface that we just never got to. That, along with some very mediocre performances, but a really great technical side to the film. I'm pretty torn on Wuthering Heights, but overall, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. If you've seen or watched this film, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.